Hey y'all, welcome back to Most of It. There's a lot of forces in the setting of 40k that aren't exactly the nicest folks around. There's the Tyranids who are actively trying to eat everything, or the Orcs that just like a good scrap and as a result cause world-ending wars. And of course, there's the Necrons who simply see everyone as annoying kids that need to get the heck off their lawns. All of these groups are of course doing bad things, but I personally wouldn't call them evil. The Tyranids eat people and planets, but you know what? A guy's gotta eat, and they just happen to be really hungry, so I can't really fault them for that. The orcs were literally created to fight, it's in their nature, and it's not like anyone else in the setting is trying not to start wars. And the Necrons are just simple retirees forced to come out and fight for what they worked so hard to earn, and the younger generations just don't get it. And I definitely can't fault them for that. But among the setting of 40k, there's one individual that I would call truly evil. One man that embodies everything that good people stand against, and that man is Lorgar Aurelian. Lorgar sucks, and I hate him. He achieves such a mustache twirling level of villainy that it'd be impressive if it wasn't so obnoxious. Throughout his whole life, Lorgar was a conniving schemer that somehow always got away with it. From crash landing on Colchis and being discovered by the Emperor to searching out chaos and bringing the Imperium to its knees through the manipulation of others, he always managed to slink away when things got too hot. And worst of all, he won. Despite being the weakest Primarch and needing others to fulfill his plans for him, he was the individual to actually out the Emperor as a god and lead his brothers away into slavery of the Dark Gods. Now don't get me wrong, I am not saying that Lorgar is a badly written character, the exact opposite actually. He is so well written that it kind of annoys me how much I hate him. Like, come on, this guy gets written this well and I don't even like him, but you all get my point. I don't like Lorgar, but I respect him for what he was able to accomplish. But this video is not just about Lorgar, it's much broader than that. During my musings on Lorgar, a question popped into my head. Should the Emperor have destroyed the 17th, and how would that have changed things going forward? Well, I'm here to do some theorizing and yapping, and hopefully answer that question today. So without further ado, let's get into this. So let's first establish why, when, and how the Word Bearers would have been destroyed. First, the why. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor was kind of in a rush to get moving and claim worlds as he saw the impending threat of chaos and knew that humanity was kind of on the clock. So when he found the Primarchs, usually within a couple of weeks, they would be kitted out and shipped off to crusade. Most legions were uber efficient about this process, with some standouts being the Dark Angels, Luna Wolves, and Ultramarines when it came to sheer numbers of planets conquered. Even in the case of, say, the World Eaters, who did as their name suggested and just killed worlds rather than try to incorporate them, they were still bringing new worlds into the Imperium, and so the Emperor let it slide. But the Word Bearers were a completely different story. With Lorgar's raising on Colchis and his intended purpose by the Emperor, he was largely concerned with ideological conversion rather than rapid takeovers. Where other legions would simply mow down or get the leadership of a world to surrender, plant their flag, and move on to the next world, the Word Bearers would go in, do the fighting that they needed to, and then hang out for a while and teach the planet's population of the greatness of the Imperium and more specifically the worship of the Emperor. And obviously, with Atheist Supreme being the head of the operation, that was a big no-no. The Word Bearers' slow conquering pace combined with their religious teachings were the main reasons that the Emperor talked of destroying them. So now that we know the why, let's move on to the when. And this is pretty easy to determine. When the Emperor showed up at Monarchia with the Ultramarines and burned it down, he would have instead showed up and started slaughtering the 17th. So now on to the how. If the Emperor was going to destroy the Word Bearers, he most likely would have sent the Space Wolves to do it. In the book The First Heretic, Lehman Russ even spoke out against the idea as he didn't want to kill another of his brothers. So now that we've established all that, let's talk about how it would have affected things. So the wolves show up and attack the Word Bearers, and maybe this is my bias talking, but I don't really think that they would have too much trouble wiping them out. Magnus was way more powerful than Lorgar, and Russ still handled him, and pre-pilgrimage, the Word Bearers weren't known for having any super powerful warriors in their ranks, so they get wiped out too. Or alternatively, they do what is assumed they did with the 2nd and 11th legions, and brainwash them and incorporate them into other legions, but that really doesn't change things too much. Alright, so Lorgar is dead. High five, good job team. So what have we avoided? Well, his pilgrimage never happens, which means the truth of chaos is not discovered by the Primarchs, and several Custodes survive. The lack of Erebus means that the Interrex negotiations go well, and Horus never gets stabbed with the poop knife, which means he doesn't fall and the heresy never happens, or at least not in the way we know it. One of the biggest events of the heresy, the burning of Prospero, is also prevented, meaning that the webway isn't shattered and the wolves don't fight the Thousand Sons, or at least not in Prospero. So this all sounds pretty great. The heresy doesn't happen, the Emperor isn't sat on the Golden Throne, and his Webway project works as intended, saving all of humanity from the hands of the Dark Gods, and everyone lives happily ever after. Or do they? Well, let's go through the traitor legions and see how things would have changed for them, starting with Horus and the Luna Wolves. Horus did have some internal issues about being abandoned by the Emperor, and that was what kind of made a hole for chaos to get to him. But without Erebus being there to put him in a coma and tempt him, I don't really think he would have fallen. I think Horus would have talked with the Emperor eventually, or even divided his War Master role between him and a few of his brothers, leading to him being more stable overall and not falling. On the other hand, the World Eaters were doomed from the start. Angron hated the Emperor enough that he would have turned traitor anyway, and he just used the heresy as an excuse. The big question with them is would they still have fallen to Khorne, as without Lorgar being there to ascend Angron, things might have gone differently. Overall, I think the Legion would have, but not Angron. Angron knew what slavery was, and he wasn't eager to get back in it, and I think he would have just fought until he died and called it good as Karn took over the World Eaters and led them deeper into Khorne's service. The Emperor's children, though, I think definitely would have still fallen. Lorgar, as far as I'm aware, had nothing to do with Fulgrim and the Lair Blade, so things would have played out roughly the same. It's possible that without a turned Horus tempting Fulgrim that he would have rejected the Blade's influence, but I don't think that's very likely. So overall, I'd say the Emperor's children still plays out roughly the same with them falling to Slaanesh. The Night Lords are similar to the World Eaters in the fact that the heresy was just an excuse that they used to turn against the Imperium. But I think due to their kind of cowardly nature, they wouldn't officially turn unless a bunch of legions turned with them. So I could see them staying loyal with a question mark as they were throughout the Great Crusades, or potentially going renegade. But if enough did turn, I think they would turn too. The Death Guard are kind of hard to answer, because at this point in lore, I'm pretty sure Typhon was already turned to Chaos and worshipping Nurgle, so how would things play out? Well, this is the way I see it. Typhon would still try to trap his legion in Nurgle's realm. The Word Bearers didn't really have anything to do with that, so that remains a constant. He would have to do it differently than how he did in lore, but I do think he would still manage it. But Mortarion is where this really gets interesting. With the death of Lorgar, I believe Morty would have just gotten more bitter and hateful towards the Emperor, as he would see him as even more of a tyrant. But without the influence of a corrupted Horus, I'm not sure if he would have gone full traitor. He would definitely harbor resentment for his father, but I don't think he would act on it unless he thought he had a chance of winning. But then he gets trapped by Typhon and has to pledge himself to Nurgle anyway, making the Death Guard pretty much the same as they are in lore right now. So overall, I do think the Death Guard would become traitor, or at least demonic, maybe demonic renegade legion or something like that. The Thousand Sons, however, I believe would have remained loyal. Without Horus making Magnus try to warn the Emperor, the Wolves would never get sent to Prospero, at least not in the way they did in official lore. I do think they would have still fought, however, at the Arc Reach cluster. Lorgar was responsible for calming the two Primarchs down there and preventing a war, but with him dead, I think the Thousand Sons and Space Wolves would have fought there. I don't think either Primarch would have died, but a good amount of their legions would have, and I believe this would be the cause of the Council of Nicaea. I think Nicaea would pretty much roll the same way it did in lore, and Magnus would have been censored, but it would have been a much smaller deal. However, the flesh change would continue in the Thousand Sons ranks, which raises a question. How would that play out? And honestly, that's kinda hard to answer. I see a few ways this could have gone. 1. The flesh change continues to happen, and eventually all the Thousand Sons are consumed by it, and the Emperor offers a grieving Magnus a new legion that would be like weaker versions of the Grey Knights. 2. The flesh change continues, and Magnus casts the rubric himself rather than Ahriman, turning his legion to dust. And 3. Magnus pledges himself to Tzeentch to cure the flesh change and becomes a traitor anyway. I think 3 is the least likely, as the Thousand Sons were the last legion to turn traitor and mostly did it because they felt they were betrayed when the wolves burned Prospero. I think the most likely is number 2, as even with the ruling of Nicaea, there's no way Magnus was going to stop looking for a cure for his sons. But even if he did turn his legion to dust, I still think he would stay loyal and would just see it as a big mistake. When it comes to the Iron Warriors, they're definitely the hardest legion for me to figure out, because Perturabo didn't like the Emperor, but the turning point for him was when he destroyed his homeworld and was convinced that the Emperor wouldn't forgive him and was turned by a corrupted Horus. But in this timeline, there is no corrupted Horus. And let's be honest here, the Emperor has looked past way worse things that the Primarchs have done, so I really don't think it would have been that big a deal. But that doesn't change the fact that Purdy hated the Emperor, so would he still have turned traitor? I honestly don't think so. Perturabo is one of the most practical Primarchs, and so I don't think he would join a cause unless he thought he could win. I don't think he would have started liking the Emperor, but at most he would have just ignored orders now and then and shown up to battles late or something like that. When it comes to the Alpha Legion, this is also kind of hard to determine. I think they would have still met the Cabal and learned about chaos and humanity and all that, but without a corrupted Horus, how would things have gone? Well, I see 2 ways. 1. The Cabal convinces them of their cause, and the Alpha Legion become the stand-ins for the Word Bearers and begin corrupting the other legions in similar ways. And 2. They aren't convinced at all and continue doing their thing all sneaky-like. Overall, I think 2 is the most likely, but 1 is an interesting enough situation that I'll probably save it for another video. So the way I see it, the Alpha Legion stays loyal. So that's all the traitor legions, but a question remains. Would any of the loyalist legions have turned traitor as a result of Lorgar's death? Well, with Sanguinius never getting sent to Cygnus Prime, he doesn't get tempted, so he's safe. And the Ruin Storm is never made by the Word Bearers, which means that there's not any infighting with the Lion and Gilliman, so they're safe too. Lehman Russ wouldn't have the doubt of being tricked into destroying Prospero on him, so he would stay loyal. And Vulcan, Corvus, and Ferris wouldn't turn either, so the only Primarch that I could see turning in this situation is honestly Jagatai Khan. The Khan already wasn't a huge fan of the Emperor, and so with the killing of Lorgar, it would just reinforce his beliefs that the Emperor was a tyrant, and so I think there's a good chance he could turn. But overall, I'm iffy on it. I could go either way. So with that, on the traitor side, we have the World Eaters, Emperor's Children, Death Guard, and potentially the Night Lords and White Scars. So then the question becomes, would that be enough to make Perturabo believe that they could win and join the cause? I personally don't think so. So Perturabo remains loyal, or at worst becomes a renegade. So we have our traitors lined up, and honestly, they don't stand a chance. In this version of the Heresy, the Imperium would have the Dark Angels, potentially the Iron Warriors, Space Wolves, Imperial Fists, Blood Angels, Ultramarines, Thousand Sons, Luna Wolves, Alpha Legion, and non-shattered Iron Hand Salamanders and Raven Guard Legions. And on top of that, throw in the Emperor not needing to sit on the Golden Throne, and yeah, all of the traitors would get wiped out pretty quickly. And even if they managed to pull off some like Isfahan Dropsite Massacre stuff, the Loyalists still win pretty handily. And best of all, Ferrus Manus keeps his head this time. Hooray! So after all the fighting is done, the Emperor is left with fewer sons, but he is able to finish his Webway project, and Magnus is able to sit on the Golden Throne, powering the Imperial Webway, securing humanity's future. The Space Wolves, Salamanders, and Alpha Legion are able to fulfill their roles as Trefoil Legions, and humanity embraces its noble bright future. So to answer the question I posed at the beginning, should the Emperor have destroyed the Word Bearers? Yes, absolutely he should have. Sometimes you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet. But what do y'all think of this question? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, y'all. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and let me know what videos you'd like to see from me in the future. Be sure to check out my community tab where I post memes and run polls from time to time, and with all that said, y'all have a great day, and I'll see y'all later.